Good morning, Mets fans, and welcome to a Thursday edition of Drivin with Mr. Met. I am Mr. Met, and it is Thursday the 23rd of January, and the Mets have named their new manager for the second time in 2 months. And as I suspected, it is Luis Rojas, from internal candidate, Luis Rojas. I'm going to talk a little bit about that, why I think it was the right move. And going to be a shorter show today, but I'll address the manager situation and look long-term with what's going to happen with this role. So when I talked earlier this week, and even last week, I really did feel like Luis Rojas was going to end up getting this job. And, I want to be clear, I don't think it's because he's the right man for the job long-term. As has been pointed out multiple times, like if Rojas was the right guy, why wasn't he hired in November when the Mets decided on Carlos Beltran? And the reality of that situation is and was, he was not the right guy at the time. Rojas is 38 years old, does not have the playing career that Beltran had, does not have the same level of respect throughout the game that Beltran has. I guess we should say had at this point, but Rojas was an interesting option in November, but certainly wasn't the right fit to lead this team just because of his age. The Mets didn't want to lose him, which is why they kept that quality control coach title and fake position open for him. Liaison between the front office and the dugout sort of role that he's filled nicely. But with the way that everything went down and how it went down and how quickly it went down and how little time the Mets have between the start of spring training and the time that Beltran was forced out, the Mets couldn't afford to bring in someone from outside, A. And B, I think the other part to this, which is important, is you can't really disrupt the coaching staff. Because, yes, Beltran is gone, but the rest of the staff is in place. They've been doing their preseason, off-season work to prepare for the season. So if the idea of maybe moving like a Tony DeFrancesco, the first base coach, or Hensley Mullins, the bench coach, moving either of those two guys into the manager's role had come up, you'd end up with a vacancy someplace else on your coaching staff. And are you really, do you really want to be looking for a new bench coach for a first-time manager, which is what Mullins would be at this stage of the game? I don't think you do. So I think that Rojas was the proverbial path of least resistance. He was in the organization. The players really do genuinely seem to love him. They loved playing for him in the minor leagues. They say how smart he is, blah, blah, blah. So, there's lots of boxes that he ticks. And again, most of them kind of lean into that path of least resistance framework. So the bottom line is the Mets have their manager for 2020, and they have him for 2021 as well. He got a 2-year deal. And this is the part that I'm scratching my head at. So this is where I have a little bit of trouble. And I can understand the one side of it, which says, like, look, you want to give this guy as much confidence as you possibly can. So if you give him a 1-year deal, he's a lame duck. He's a lame duck manager. It's the textbook definition of lame duck manager. 1-year contract, whatever. I was of the opinion that the Mets should have slapped an interim label on Rojas, made him the interim manager for 2020, and made it very abundantly clear to him that if he does as well as the team did last year or even better, he's the man. There'll be no search. There'll be no discussion. He's going to get a multi-year deal starting in 2021. By the way, with the injection of Steve Cohen's money right around the corner, that could have been attractive to Rojas. Now, I'm sure that they talked about stuff like this, but that would have been my preference. If I were picking the manager, and if I was going to go with Rojas like the Mets did, I would have said, let's get a interim tag. You'll be in charge of the team. We support you. Blah blah blah. Do good, and you're the man. That would have been my preference, as opposed to slapping a 2-year contract on the guy. So now the Mets are not only paying Mickey Callaway to not be the manager, they had to settle with Carlos Beltran to not be the manager, and now they have to pay Luis Rojas to be the manager. which is fine. You know, look, the Mets can afford it, right? The Wilpons, for all of their flaws, they still have enough money to be able to afford stuff like this. So that's the situation. That's the new manager, and I'm okay with it. I think at the end of the day, with baseball in 2020, the manager role has so much less importance on it than it did in years past that you don't need to worry that much about a manager making terrible mistakes. Now, look, you can point to to Mickey Callaway from last year. All right, Mickey Callaway was a terrible manager. Everyone says it. Terrible manager, made terrible decisions, blah, blah, blah. Let's think of it differently. Had Mickey Callaway's horseshit, train wreck, garbage bullpen performed even at a league average level, Mickey Callaway's team, despite him, wins 90-plus games. Which is why I absolutely have no problem saying that the manager does not matter all that much in 2020. It's the truth. It is the truth. Good teams are going to win. Bad teams are not going to win. And where the manager might come into play is when you've got all of the pieces clicking if he doesn't make mistakes. And look, you won't know if that's going to happen until the manager takes the seat and gets into the job. We saw from Mickey Callaway that he was not a good manager in terms of making in-game decisions. We saw that. And yes, that might have cost his bungling of the managerial process last year, might have cost the Mets 3 or 4 games, but that pales in comparison to the number of games that the bullpen cost the Mets last year. So, I'm again, if this bullpen this year performs at a league average level and the offense doesn't falter, why aren't they winning 4 or 5 or 6 more games and putting them at the 90 win plateau? I'm serious. I cannot rationalize how that won't happen in my head. Again, assuming that the players play to their capabilities. The manager's not going to impact that. He's just not. So Edwin Diaz has to be good. Not going to matter who the manager is. It's not. Jerry's Familia has to be good. It's not going to matter who the manager is. Dellin Betances has to be healthy and good. Not going to matter who the manager is. Sorry. So that's that. That's my thoughts on the managerial process and the managerial search. Hopefully, now that we've got Rojas locked up for 2 years, we won't have to do this until 2022, or before 2022, I guess, the end of next year, end of 2021. But at least we have one off season coming up where we won't have to worry about a managerial search. That'll be nice. One funny tidbit I saw, Mike Mayer posted this on Twitter, and this was a good one. Luis Rojas is 38 years old now, and at the time now that he's being hired to be the manager, he's 38. When his older brother Moises was signed by the Mets before the 2007 season to be the everyday left fielder, he was 2 years older than Luis Rojas, now manager of the Mets. So 40-year-old Moises in 2007, who, by the way, was awesome. If you don't remember, dude, Moises Alou was a freaking raker and a half. The guy could roll out of bed with hangover like you couldn't believe and would still go 3 for 4. Now, granted, if he didn't hurt himself on the way out of bed, that was the other problem. But we're not talking about Moises Alou. Just thought that was an interesting tidbit there by Mikey Mayer. So, thanks again to everybody for watching today. I'll be back maybe tomorrow, maybe Monday, depending on how I feel. You can hear I still have a pretty awful cold and I've got all this congestion and nonsense, so I may or may not be back tomorrow, and it depends on what goes on today, if there's any news worth talking about. The Starling Marte stuff might heat back up. If it does, I'll be here tomorrow to talk about it. So until then, or until Monday, thanks again for watching. Follow me on Twitter at Mr_Met, and as always, let's go Mets.